Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Tournament Podcast with my brothers Tom and Mike. This is Marty. We are excited to bring you another episode of our normal podcast. What we do here is typically topics based on entertainment, movies, music, professional wrestling, which is usually my wheelhouse. But today, we are going to do something a little bit different. It's that time of year. We've got all the hype with the college football playoff announcement coming today. We are in the thick of the NFL season. So what I wanted to do this week was to do an 8-team tournament, the best NFL teams of all time. This was not easy to come up with a list. A comprehensive list. I went through several, probably 8 or so different websites from CBS Sports, ESPN, Yahoo. I used some of the stat tracking websites to come up with this list that I took what I felt based on all that were the top 8 teams of all time. And as always, when you're looking at such a small number, there are going to be some teams that people say, what? You didn't put them in there? Or you put this team in there? Well, guess what? If you don't like the teams I put in there or think I should have added someone else, comment. We love it. Constructive criticism, any questions, just comment. We read the comments, etc. Without further ado, Tom, Mike, do you guys have anything before we get going and I'll unveil the 8 teams?
I have nothing. I'm just excited to get started. And Mike and I had no idea what this topic was. That's kind of the general format that we follow here on the Tournament Podcast. So each week we rotate. So this week it was Marty's topic. Next week would be Mike. Then I would be the following, and the other two have no idea what the topic is. So, we're caught off guard, but I'm excited.
Yep,
nice.
Let's do it.
All right. Let me unveil the 8 teams. This is in no specific order, but here we go. First, we've got the 1992 Dallas Cowboys, who were 13-3 on the year, Super Bowl champions also. The 1999 St. Louis Rams, the greatest show on turf, also 13-3. They also won the Super Bowl. We have the 1975 Pittsburgh Steelers, who went 12-2 and were also Super Bowl champs. The 1989 San Francisco 49ers, that was a hard one for me to put in there, 14-2. They were also Super Bowl champs, if you kind of catch what I'm saying there.
Yep.
We've got the 1991 Washington Redskins, who were 14-2, also Super Bowl champs.
Diesel.
The 2007 New England Patriots, who were 16-0, but were not Super Bowl champions. They were upset by the Giants that year, I believe, in the Super Bowl. We have the 1985 Chicago Bears, who were 15-1, Super Bowl champions. And the last team, the 1972 Miami Dolphins, 14-0, also Super Bowl champions. So there's our list of 8 greatest teams of all time that we're going to put in our tournament format and kind of see if we can come out with a winner. We will come out with a winner. Our first matchup, the 1992 Dallas Cowboys going against the 1972 Miami Dolphins. And Mike, would you be interested in starting us off here?
Yeah, sure. This is an interesting matchup just because, of course, being a fan of football like we all are, I do know, of course, that the Dolphins in 1972 were the last undefeated team. But of course, just based on age and everything, I'm much more familiar with the 1992 Cowboys with Emmett and Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin. I mean, that team was stacked. I mean, I know the Dolphins went, what was it, 14-0, I believe?
Yes.
Yeah, back then. But it's still going undefeated, whether it was 14-0, 16-0. Still an impressive feat. It's just, how do you compare two teams from two different eras?
It's tough.
Yeah.
I can give you a couple little quick tidbits, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Oh, no, go for it.
the 1992 Dallas Cowboys were second in the league in scoring offense and fifth in scoring defense. So they're considered one of the most consistent teams in NFL history on both sides of the ball. And as you had named some of the superstars that they had on that team, the 72 Dolphins, interestingly, they had most of their season with their backup quarterback, who was Earl Morrall, I believe, or Morale, however you say. I think Earl Morrall.
Yeah.
Because Greasy was injured. But as you know, yeah, they were undefeated, and they also had some hosses. They had Zonka and Mercury Morris, who were both 1,000-yard rushers. So sorry, Mike.
Oh, no. And it looks like, unless I'm reading this wrong, that the Dolphins in 72 were the top offense and top defense.
I believe so. Yeah.
That appears to be the case. I mean, man, wow. Like I said, it just makes it tough because it's two different eras, two different styles of football. It was much more, rough and gritty in the 70s than it was in the 90s. But then again, compared to how it is now, 1992 is just a distant memory. But man, just fair or not, just because I'm much more familiar with the Cowboys team, and yeah, that team was stacked top to bottom. Even though the Dolphins did go undefeated, my gut just tells me the 1992 Dallas Cowboys. I just pictured those two teams going head to head one time. Who do I think would come out on top? And I think I'm going to go with the Cowboys for this one. So
with the Cowboys, okay.
Yep, the 92 Cowboys.
Okay, Mike, as we know, picked the 92 Cowboys. I'm going to go ahead and jump in here with my pick and possibly put Tom on the hot seat. I'm not sure yet, honestly. But like Mike said, this is very difficult when you're comparing teams from not even just, early in the decade and later. We're talking about decades in between them. A lot has changed in the NFL in that time, as far as not only rule changes, but game plans, offenses are a lot more wide open now. I'd mentioned the 72 Dolphins had 2,000-yard rushers and Zonka and Morris. The 92 Cowboys were, high octane. Everybody knows, Aikman and Emmitt Smith, but they had a, whole lot more besides that. This is a tough one. The Cowboys had 23 passing touchdowns and 20 rushing touchdowns. The Dolphins had 17 passing touchdowns and 26 rushing. And again, the style of play was very different back then. So that doesn't really help too much. Boy, this is tough. I'm so on the fence to make things interesting. I'm going to go with the 72 Dolphins and put Tom on the hot seat because it's that close. So I'm going with the Dolphins. Tom?
Yeah, well, you're not putting me on the hot seat.
Oh, here we go. He already has his pick.
It depends on how you're comparing these two. If you're just simply literally taking the players at that time and matching them against each other, clearly it's the Dallas Cowboys because they're bigger, faster, stronger. They would just dominate, the Dolphins, the size of those players, the athletic ability that they had isn't going to compare to the 92 Dallas Cowboys. But if you just did that, then the most modern team then would win. So I try not to do that necessarily.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, you're talking the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, they were young, they were fast. I think in terms of skill position players, they had one guy, tight end Jay Novacek, was 30. There wasn't another player that was 30. all these guys, kids were in their 20s. I mean, they were fast, they were explosive, they were dominant. The Miami Dolphins were exactly the opposite. So what an interesting first matchup. They were slow and prodding. Two rushers over 1,000 yards, the fullback and the halfback, Mercury Morris, who just got 1,000 even, but I'm glad he did. It's, you know, kind of a cool stat. Now the run game obviously was dominant. Zonka had 5.2 a carry. Mercury had 5.3 a carry. But their quarterback, as you mentioned, was Earl, the backup. He was 38 years old. And again, just kind of looking at errors, you know, they only had to play 14 games. I just don't think they can match up with the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, Don Shula, one of the greats of all time, but so is Jimmy Johnson. I mean, Jimmy, in my eyes, is literally a top 5 of all time football coach. So I'm going to go with the 92 Dallas Cowboys all day here.
Okay. Well, let me just say unofficially the Cowboys advance, because anyone that knows our podcast knows that we each have a veto that we could use. I'm not going to use my veto, but I just wanted to throw that out there. We do have a veto that we could use. So the Dallas Cowboys advance, and they will go up against the winner of this matchup, the 89 49ers versus the 1991 Washington Redskins. That's another toughie, as these all will be. Tom, would you like to go first on this one?
Yeah. And I'd like to pull a little something up here before I do get started.
Do it.
Obviously, San Francisco, we are very familiar with them because all 3 of us are Bengals fans. And that year they made it to the Super Bowl against the Bengals. You know, broke our hearts. You know, we had our hearts broken twice in the Super Bowl. Guess what? It was damn Montana and Rice and Ronnie Lott and those guys both times.
Actually, the year before was actually a little correction. The year before was actually the year that they beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl, because I was just doing my little comparison.
So 88 was the Bengals.
So 88, yep. They in the, I guess what, January of 89 or but yeah, the 89 49ers beat I think it was the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl.
Oh, okay.
So they won back to back.
I'm trying to think. So this was the Boomer Esiason was 88. Was Ken Anderson 81?
Yes, exactly.
So what a span of excellence. I mean, you got to give the San Francisco 49ers. So just taking a quick little dive here. I like to have some stats. Joe Montana against Joe Theismann. Wow. I mean, what a matchup there. Joe Montana is certainly in rarefied air. I think still thought of as one of the 3, 4, I mean, at least the 5 best quarterbacks to ever play. Roger Craig was a damn good running back. That year he averaged 3.9 a carry. He had a little over 1,000 yards. Joe threw for 3,500. Obviously, as I mentioned, Ronnie Lott, and it wasn't like the defense was a slouch. I don't know what their overall rank was, and I don't know if that can be pulled up here. Oh yeah, well, points against, they were 3rd in the NFL that season. So they were the number 1 scoring offense, the number 3 scoring defense. So, or at least scoring against defense. So very well balanced San Francisco team. All right, I got my stats pulled up here. So we are going with the 89 San Francisco 49ers, the 91 Redskins, which is a good matchup because we don't really have to worry about eras here. They're in the exact same era. Quarterbacks, I mean, come on. I think everybody would agree San Francisco in this matchup would have the advantage. Mark Rippon, Joe Montana. The San Francisco 49ers that year were the number 1 scoring offense in the league, and out of 28 teams, and they had the 3rd best defense in terms of points against. Whereas the Washington Redskins that year, or in 91, they had the number 1 defense, but they had the number 1 offense, the number 2 defense. So you talk about 2 balanced and stacked teams. I mean, it's pretty incredible, really. Mark Rippon threw for 3,500 yards. Joe Montana threw for 3,500 yards. Roger Craig, the main running back, really the only one they used during the season with any sort of regularity, had just over 1,000 yards rushing. And actually, so did well, the Washington Redskins used Ernest Biner and Ricky Irvins, but Ernest had barely over 1,000. Ricky Irvins had a really good year, almost 700 yards rushing as well. But there's just something, being a Bengals fan, knowing, that we met, I think every time the 49ers went to the Super Bowl, they won in that era. I don't think with Joe Montana, they ever lost a trip to the Super Bowl. And it's just, that's what sticks in my mind. You have obviously great offense, great defense with both of these teams, but one team had Joe Montana, and that's just the deciding factor to me. So I'm going to go with the 49ers here, the 1989 San Francisco 49ers.
All right. I will actually jump in here and take the second turn. Yeah, like Tom said, 89 49ers, 91 Redskins, pretty much within just a couple years of each other. So we don't have to worry about the generational gaps. Tom covered everything pretty well. San Francisco with Joe Montana, obviously one of the best of all time, no question. The 49ers had a lot of weapons, and a matter of fact, in that year, 89, I believe Steve Young had a couple games he played when Montana was injured, and that's when Steve Young really started to come out. But anybody that knows football knows that Steve Young was incredibly talented anyway, could have been a starter on probably most teams. 91 Redskins, I was pretty young then. I would have been a young teenager. I enjoyed the Redskins, and it may have been a bandwagonish type of a thing at that age. I'm not sure, but I've always been a fan of Ernest Biner. And I think a little bit of it was because I know Cleveland fans hated him, which made me like Ernest, but I always thought Biner was a heck of a running back. I have his starting lineup, just to throw that out there. But Washington Redskins, definitely no slouch. Joe Gibbs, Hall of Fame coach. They had a pretty darn good offense too. I mean, my gosh, Gary Clark and Monk and all those guys out there. But again, like Tom said, probably the biggest difference maker, one of these teams had Joe Montana, the other did not. So I do have to agree. I'm going to go with the 89 49ers. So unless Mike feels strongly enough to use his veto, but Mike, what's your pick and thoughts on this one?
I am not, spoiler alert, going to use my veto because I am going to go with the 49ers as well. I mean, like I said, the comparisons for just those two seasons are so spot on. The quarterback play was almost exact. Running backs both rushed for almost the same amount. Their rankings offensively, defensively were darn near the same. So it's hard, both teams performed. I mean, they were both 14-2, both won the Super Bowl, performed exactly the same. So yeah, at the end of the day, comparing the two, the only way to really separate them is like I said, Montana was it like 4-0 or something, 5-0 in Super Bowls, never lost one. So yeah, again, like you guys both said, that's the difference maker. Even though in 89, his stats are very comparable to what Rippon did in 91, but yeah, overall, just the career of the two men were vastly different. Not to say Rippon was bad, but he was no Joe Montana, obviously. So yeah, just because of Joe, I'm going to go ahead and give the Niners from 89 the edge.
And if I could jump in here real quick.
Yeah.
And I think maybe this will be a quick hit. We'll pull this out, maybe see if we can get some conversation going on this short little clip. But you had mentioned Steve Young playing that year, and that it dawned on me that has there ever been a greater quarterback transition in the history of the NFL than having Joe Montana and then going to Steve Young? I can't think of any that would be, I mean, like the Patriots right now are hoping Tom Brady to Mac Jones turns out to be that. But in terms of historically, and we've seen it play out and it's done, has there been a greater 1-2 quarterback over like 2 eras, if you will, for the same team than Joe Montana and Steve Young? I can't think of any. So I'll leave it to the viewers, or if you guys have any thoughts.
How about Bledsoe to Tom Brady with the Patriots? Not that Bledsoe was on that level, but Bledsoe was a good quarterback. I mean, he took them to the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, Bledsoe was good. I don't think that it would be Montana to Young, certainly. But
no.
I was gonna say one could argue Carson Palmer to Andy Dalton.
Oh no.
Yeah, and that one would be you. That makes me sick.
If you like playoff football, they didn't win a game, but hey, I'd take that over the 90s Bengals.
Oh no.
Want to puke.
I can't believe it. What's happening here, guys?
Would you rather watch 2-14 football or playoff football? I rest my case. Let's move on.
This has become very personal and well, yeah, without further ado here, the next matchup is the 1999 St. Louis Rams, the quote-unquote greatest show on turf, versus the 1985 Chicago Bears, the Shuffling Crew. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this one first. This is an interesting matchup. You do have a little bit of the differences here with the era, certainly, but I guess when you look at these teams, you're going to think the 99 Rams, high octane offense, the 85 Bears, high octane defense. The 99 Rams broke records. They passed for Kurt Warner passed for over 4,300 yards, 42 touchdowns. Just sensational. They had a heck of a receiving core. They had Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, Ricky Prohl. They had all kinds of studs out there. I think they also had a running back who was real good. Oh, that's right. Marshall Falk, who had over 2,000 all-purpose yards, which is absolutely insane.
Could have been a Bengal. Sorry, go ahead.
That would have been neat. Then we have the 85 Bears, who, again, I think most people think of the Bears, you think of one of the most stout defenses of all time. They held their opponents to only 12.4 points a game. Their offense scored 28.5, so, not a slouch at all on the offensive side of the ball. But, their defense, again, I mean, Richard Dent, Otis Wilson, those two guys alone on the defensive ends had 27 sacks just between them right there. So you truly have a battle of great offense versus great defense. Who do you think will win? The greatest show on turf, I think, would still score, probably some big points, but I do feel that Kurt Warner would probably be pressured by that defense. And again, the Bears were no slouch offensively. So, could they score on the clip of these 99 Rams? No, not a chance. But I still lean towards that, mantra that defense wins games, even though that offense is so good. Boy, this is a tough one, but I'm going to go on the slight edge. I'm old school. Anybody that knows our podcast knows that. I'm going to go with the 85 Bears. So 85 Bears for me. Then Tom, who do you think?
Yeah, and this is just like the first matchup. It's a broad, two different eras completely. Now I do want to throw this in first of all. The Rams in 99 had the number one offense, which isn't going to surprise anybody. They had the number 4 defense out of 31 teams in terms of points against. So the defense was pretty stout. And when you were an offense like them or the old Peyton Manning Colts teams, you scored so rapidly, the defense was always on the field. So for them to finish 4th with that type of offense is really impressive. So we don't want to downplay the defense that they had. obviously the Bears, they had the second best offense, clearly the number one defense. I mean, just a dominant defensive team, maybe the greatest of all time. And that is, so I just start thinking positions. I mean, the running backs, Walter Payton, Marshall Faulk, kind of balance out. I think, the Rams had the more explosive receivers. The Rams had the better quarterback, which is generally in any head-to-head matchup, I'm going to go with coaching and quarterback, and then you need sufficient players everywhere else, but it seems to start there. So you have Ditka and Dick Vermeil, I believe it was. Obviously, I think we'd all take Kurt Warner over Jim McMahon. No offense to Jim, but it's hard. As good as the defense was for the Bears, and they were special. Again, like I said, could possibly be the greatest of all time. It's difficult because I think the Rams defense was good enough to be able to obviously give Jim McMahon trouble and hold Walter down somewhat. So I'm going to go with the 99 Rams, actually, in a very close game. We'll say a walk-off field goal to win it.
Okay. Well, we have, it's not our first tiebreaker, but
Yep.
we have another tiebreaker situation for Mike. 99 Rams and the 85 Bears. Mike, ball is in your hands, literally.
Yep. This is an interesting one again, as most of them are, but yeah, it's funny because the Bears from 85 are, primarily known for the defense. You don't really hear anything about the offense too much versus the 99 Rams were, the greatest show on turf, but nobody talks really about the defense. But yeah, both teams were top 5 on each side of the ball. Man, I mean, the 85 Bears were 15-1. The Rams, I believe, were 13-3. So the Bears had a better season. Like Tom said, the position play, well, for the most part, offensively, you're gonna go with, of course, the Rams. You had Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, Kurt Warner,
and Marshall was a
yeah,
hell of a receiver
Marshall,
too.
yeah. Marshall Faulk had over 1,000 yards receiving for a running back, and still had 1,300, almost 1,400 on the ground. So yeah, hell of a season, man. Maybe one of the best all-around seasons for a running back ever. But yeah, that Bears defense, which I think you forgot to mention, Marty, also included Steve Mongo McMichael. A little shout out there.
True.
And a little wrestling connection for fans of professional wrestling. So yeah, both teams were stellar, but oh man, just again picturing them going head to head. I think I'm with Tom on this one. The defense of the Bears was stellar, but I don't know how they would be able to hold up against all the offensive weapons that the Rams had, because in 1985, how many teams were that stacked at quarterback, receiver, running back? Not too many teams were that stacked back then. And yeah, and again, like you said, Tom, no offense to Jim McMahon, but he wasn't called upon, obviously, to do too much. I mean, he only had 15 touchdowns to 11 picks. Or Kurt Warner had over 40 touchdowns. And again, Faulk with the almost 1,400 on the ground. So they were doing it everywhere, running, passing, obviously defensively. So yeah, as good as the Bears were, I just don't think they would be able to hang with the 89 Rams with all those weapons. So with the slightest of edges, I'm going to go with the 1999 St. Louis Rams.
So that means that the St. Louis Rams would have advanced. However, I'm not going to use my veto. They will advance. It is a tough one. What you have here, you talk about generational gap. You've got me, an older guy, old school. You've got the two young bucks there, Tom and Mike, who love the current generations. So I'm outnumbered. The Rams move on there, which leaves our final matchup of this first round, another generational battle here. We've got the 1975 Pittsburgh Steelers going against a totally different generation, the 2007 New England Patriots. Again, you talk about two polar opposites. Mike, you can start this one out for us.
All right. Let me pull these two teams up here real quick.
Do it.
Do my comparisons. I
don't need any comparisons for this one, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, I know both teams were stacked. You know, obviously with New England, you know about Brady. They had Moss. I shouldn't say stacked. It was just Brady and Moss, but they had just those two guys alone. Yeah, like looking at the Patriots, they had the number one offense, the fourth defense. So that's another one of those years where everybody, I think, talks mostly about the offense of the 07 Patriots because of Brady and what Randy Moss did. Because let me check here, but unless I'm mistaken, was that the year when Brady had 50 touchdowns?
Whew.
Obviously, they went, they came so close to being undefeated, if not for what was, let's be honest, a lucky catch at the end of the Super Bowl, which, no offense to the Giants, they earned it and deserved it. But that pass that Eli threw, I believe it was David Tyree, and he caught it against his helmet. I mean, there was a lot of luck involved in that as well. But so the Patriots, you could argue, should have gone undefeated all the way through. But yeah, Brady with 50 touchdowns. Let's see, Randy Moss. I'm trying to find Moss here. Was Randy not on this team? Oh, there he is. Randy Moss. I was going to say, I thought he was. Randy Moss with 23 touchdown receptions.
Wow.
Oh, man. So, yeah, I mean, that combo alone, because, I mean, I don't even know who their running back was at the time. It looks like the running back was, Lawrence Maroney. They had Sammy Morris, Kevin Falk. So they used a bunch of different guys on the ground. It was mostly that Brady and Moss connection that almost took them to an undefeated season. 1975. You got Terry Bradshaw, of course, who was never the greatest quarterback. Just, won 4 or 5 Super Bowls, but obviously not going to go down as, the best of all time, like Brady, I think, to a lot of people is currently. Your actually running back was it Rocky? I'm not even familiar with this gentleman, but he had 500 Blyer, yeah. 520.
Shows you the ages.
Yeah.
Mike is the youngest brother, by the way.
He had 528 yards, which that ain't going to get it done.
But Franco Harris was the number one back.
Franco Harris was the fullback, but had 1,200 yards. Obviously, I'm familiar with Lynn Swan. So yeah, I am familiar with the team. Let's see, they were fifth in offense. I'd have thought they'd have been higher than that. Fifth in offense, second in defense. Again, the Patriots were first in offense, fourth in defense. So, yeah, I mean, offensively, I think that 75 Steelers team, which was 12-2, had more weapons. But that Patriots team, 16-0, man, didn't have as many weapons. Apparently, they just, worked better with what they had. I forgot, actually, they had Wes Welker as well. So my apologies. Wes had over 1,000 yards. So, yeah, again, the age difference, even though I am familiar with the Steelers, the players, what they did in that time frame. And I believe it was either 4 or 5 Super Bowls. I'm, of course, much more familiar with that 07 Patriots team. Oh, man, just pitting those two teams against each other. Again, even though I think the Steelers had more weapons, it's hard to go against Brady. The GOAT, the man's got 7 Super Bowl rings to Bradshaw's 4 or 5. And I mean, most people are going to, take Brady over Bradshaw. So my gut tells me to go with the '07 Patriots, who, again, if not for a somewhat lucky catch, would have finished that season most likely 16-0 and Super Bowl champions. So, as good as the Steelers were, heck with it, I'm going with the '07 New England Patriots.
All right. I will go ahead and jump in on this one. These are the kind of matchups that I really like. I do like the different generations and the what ifs. I'm a big fan of that. And this is, the epitome of that. The 75 Steelers. I'm not a fan of the Steelers, and we're Cincinnati guys, so that says it all right there. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, the steel curtain of that generation, so dominant. They had 11 Pro Bowlers on that team, 3 All-Pros. The All-Pros were defensive studs, L.C. Greenwood, Jack Ham, you had Mel Blount. So their defense was no joke, hence the steel curtain. The offense was not high octane really at all. And I think, again, a lot of that is based on the generations. I think they ran more. They played smash mouth. Passing didn't evolve to like it is nowadays with all these complex schemes and routes. Bradshaw, I know he's known as a great quarterback, but statistically, he's not. Franco Harris was a beast. Then you jump into the 2007 Patriots, like Mike said, look at the offense they had. Randy Moss, 23 touchdowns, receiving incredible. Wes Welker had over 100 receptions and 1,000 yards. They had, it doesn't matter. Some of the years they didn't even have a big name wide receiver, but they still had Tom Brady. That 50 passing touchdowns is incredible. That year they scored 69% more points than the league average. So, they were lighting it up. This is, again, the kind of matchup where you have to look at, would the Steelers defense be able to contain Tom Brady and their offense? I think they would definitely be able to hold them below their normal standards. But the Patriots as well, they had a defense that wasn't by any means anything to sneeze at. So you've got the Patriots defense, who I think could definitely, contain or shut down Bradshaw. So I'm going to agree with Mike on this one. This actually is probably the easiest one for me so far. I'm going to go with the Patriots as well. Tom, what do you think?
Well, I don't, and that's a good thing about the tournament is that we have 3, different people giving input. So not one, singular person can push like a team through. I will go ahead and just say, spoiler alert here. I think the '07 Patriots are the greatest NFL team of all time.
Ooh,
and I've said that since '07, just because they lost the last game, or like the old curmudgeon Miami Dolphins people. We went 14-0 and it was a 14-game season. The playoffs weren't as, long as they are now. So to me, it's the '07 Patriots. Randy Moss caught more touchdown passes than Terry Bradshaw threw in 75. But so many other factors. But I'm going to go with the GOAT, Tom Brady, and the '07 Patriots.
No spoiler alert there at all. So,
Nice.
It's unanimous. Yeah, that one to me was the easiest one that we had. So now we jump into the semifinals here, guys. And in the first matchup, we have the 1992 Dallas Cowboys. They're going to be going up against the 1989 San Francisco 49ers. So this, again, is a battle of NFC superiority here. And these teams battled a lot over the years for, that NFC championship. So on this one, Tom, would you like to go first?
Yeah, and generally when we move into the second round of a tournament, we go a little quicker. So I'm going to try to do that here. Obviously, like any of these, especially in the second round, they start getting really tough. But I As I mentioned earlier, I look at two key factors first, and that is the head coach and the quarterback. Obviously, this is very difficult. You got George Seifert against Jimmy Johnson. I'm going to take Jimmy Johnson all day. Then you move into quarterback. You've got Troy Aikman, an all-time great, and Joe Montana. I'm going to lean towards Joe. So it kind of splits it right there. So you got to look at something else. Both teams pretty comparable in terms of those seasons, in terms of being dominant offensive teams, and still really, really good on defense. You got Jerry Rice on one hand, you got Michael Irvin on the other hand. I mean, it is very, very difficult. You got Roger Craig on one hand, Emmitt Smith on the other. So this could almost be a coin flip. I'm just going to lean more towards, and maybe it's because I'm a Bengals fan, and I'm very disappointed with the 49ers. But I'm going to lean more towards just the head coach. I'm going to take Jimmy Johnson over George Seifert, and I'm going to go with the 92 Dallas Cowboys here.
Ooh, okay. So Tom's going with the Cowboys. Mike, do you want to jump in here second?
Sure. Yeah. Kind of agreeing with what Tom said there, kind of going back to it. Both teams very comparable offensively, defensively. What they finished the season, I believe the Niners were 14-2. Yeah, the Cowboys were 13-3. The quarterback play in those respective seasons was very similar. Actually looked at the two receivers, Rice and Irvin, the two top receivers on each of those teams were comparable as well. I believe Rice had over 1,400, a little over 1,400 yards receiving. Irvin was just shy of 1,400. So very comparable. So for me, I'm actually going to kind of look at the running back situation. And well, I guess you could say the same for the coaching, because again, what Tom said, as far as the coaches go, you're going to take Jimmy Johnson. But I'm also going to look at the ground game. Roger Craig had a heck of a season in '89, just over 1,000 yards, which isn't anything to sneeze at. But Emmitt Smith had over 1,700 yards. Yeah, I mean, that's no matter what the era, even now, where the game has evolved so much, 1,700 yards, still very impressive, let alone in 1992. So I'm going to look to that and to the coaching. And I'm going to say the 1992 try that again. The 1992 Dallas Cowboys. I can't talk today.
Nice.
Damn it.
All right. So it's unanimous here. Unless I were to use a veto. This is it is a tough matchup. I mean, you guys are right. A lot of things can sort of cancel out here. I think Troy Aikman was a fine quarterback, but he was not Joe Montana. I mean, looking at that year, Aikman threw for 3,485 yards, 23 touchdowns. Montana had 4,302 yards, 35 touchdowns. So you can already kind of see, the difference there. Oh man, this is a tough matchup for me. You guys both went with the Cowboys based on it. It sounds like coaching was your guys' kind of, tiebreaker situation. To me, I've got to say again, you're talking about Joe Montana, who was the ultimate winner, who was Tom Brady before Tom Brady. So for me, it's really hard to go against Joe Montana. I'm going to not only go with the 49ers, I'm actually going to do something I don't know that I've ever done. I'm going to use my veto and actually move the 49ers on, unless one of you guys are passionate enough to unveto my veto. What do you guys think of that?
Oh, I mean, I'm stunned.
I know it's Joe Montana. It's Joe Montana.
Yeah, but Troy Aikman is a Hall of Famer as well.
He is,
Yeah.
but he's
And-
not Joe Montana.
Yeah, and I do agree with that. But man,
I'm coming in big.
Yeah,
But
I'm not going to, and Mike or I right now could jump on top and use our veto
Yeah.
to even it back out and push the Cowboys forward. But I don't know if Mike will agree with me, but in terms of using my veto here against Joe Montana, as much as I'm disappointed that he, led the 49ers to 2 Super Bowl victories over the Bengals, I can't veto against Joe Montana, so I will not veto. But that's just me.
no,
Mike?
I agree. Even though I do think the Cowboys deserve to move on, and like I said, a big part of it for me, since everything else was so, they were all equal as far as, like I said, quarterback play for that particular season. The top receiver, just that running game of Dallas was so good, so much better than San Francisco's was in '89. But yeah, it's hard to use a veto against Joe Montana, so I will not use mine either, even though I disagree.
Well, let's address the elephant in the room here and just ask this, since I used my veto, which I don't know that I've ever done. Are you guys mad at me?
You've used it, I think, once or twice. in the
Have I?
past,
Okay.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
had to. I'm not a 49ers fan at all, obviously, again, because Cincinnati. But I mean, Joe Montana to me was the big deal breaker on that one, or difference maker, I should say. So I don't know if my brothers are mad at me, but we still have to move on here. We've got a show to do, which brings us to our final semifinal round here, which is the 1999 St. Louis Rams versus the 2007 Patriots. This is an offensive battle for the ages. Mike, do you want to take this bad boy?
Sure. This, this at least for me is the toughest matchup yet. Doing the quick little comparison, both teams again were first in offense in those respective seasons, and both teams were actually fourth in defense. So as far as the defensive and offensive rankings go, both finished exactly the same. Obviously, again, the Patriots were 16-0. Somehow the Rams lost 3 games. The quarterback play, I mean, overall, Brady's Brady. He's the GOAT. I think most people would agree. But Kurt was no slouch, obviously. He's a Hall of Famer. And again, what he did that season, not long after he'd been literally bagging groceries, I believe, and was called upon, to quarterback an NFL team and won a Super Bowl. Got to, I believe, 2 others throughout his career. Heck of a feat, heck of a quarterback. But oh man, with them being so equal offensively and defensively, it's a cow to you. 2 amazing offenses, but obviously 2 top 5 defenses as well. It's just, I'm just even though I think Brady is the GOAT and Tom, I think we know where he's going to go because he already said he thinks that's the single best team in NFL history. But that 99 Rams team was the greatest show on turf for a reason. Just without delaying it, my gut instinct is the 99 Rams. So with all due respect to the Patriots of 07, who were amazing, and again, even though the Rams somehow lost 3 games, they were the greatest show on turf for a reason. I'm going to go with the 99 Rams. It wasn't easy, but it's a coin flip at that point.
I'm going to go ahead and jump in here next. This is a tough one, and this is why we are the tournament podcast, where matchups are everything. We take these tough matchups, put them in a tournament format. It's all randomly generated by our proprietary tournament generator. That's what separates us from other podcasts. So we do have these tough matchups. I mean, Yeah, the greatest show on turf. We've already talked about, all these things. So we try to make these quicker. They were explosive. They scored basically 33 points a game. Um, but then you've got the 2007 Patriots with Tom Brady. I mean, they were also, an offensive juggernaut. Um, the big distinction is, and interestingly, out of all 8 teams in our list here, they all won the Super Bowl except this 2007 Patriots team. So something has to be said about that. Was it luck? Maybe, but they did lose. Yeah, this is tough. I mean, Tom Brady was unstoppable that year. Um, they both had, good defenses, as Mike mentioned. Oh man, this I think I am going to by a slight edge because again, I did this for Montana. I have to show the same respect for Tom Brady because he's Tom Brady. Look at all those rings. He almost has both hands filled, every finger. I'm going to go with the 07 Patriots and put Tom on the hot seat again. Tom, what's your take?
Well, again, not on the hot seat for me.
Here he goes.
Let's just start. And you mentioned, this tournament format and these tough decisions. And we appreciate everybody watching, giving your opinion on what you think as well. And I think sometimes, it's a little drawn out on our decisions because it is very difficult. And I mean, who else could do this but the three of us? I mean, the mental anguish.
No one.
Like, what do you got? These other shows, Keyshawn, Jay Will, Max, Stephen A, Shannon, Skip. I don't think they could do this sort of a format. And they're pretty good at what they do, but this is a special format. We can handle it. We're mentally tough. If any of those guys ever want to come on and join us, you got an invitation.
We dare you.
But I am going to go again, and especially in the second round, I just start with the first two key factors, and there's many key factors: head coach and quarterback. Dick Vermeil against Bill Belichick. I mean, you got to go with Bill, even if you don't like him. It is what it is. He's that good. He's probably the GOAT. And then quarterback, again, we love Kurt Warner. They just came out with a movie about him, by the way. And Tom Brady, you got to go with Tom Brady. So with me, it's the Patriots.
And it is just to touch on what Marty said. It's funny that Brady's won twice as many Super Bowls as he's lost. It's just crazy to think that 07 team, that's one of the ones that he lost, as good as that team was. And like I said, arguably the best single season for any team ever. And that's one of the, three possibly that he lost, 2 or 3. You would have thought immediately looking at what they did that season and 16-0, oh, they had to have won it. But again, it just a catch against the helmet and crunch time, and they couldn't pull it out like Kurt Warner did, but that doesn't matter.
So let's get to this moment of anticipation, though. Mike, you went with the Rams. Tom and I went with the Patriots. Are you using your veto on the Rams and against Tom Brady?
Yeah, I will not. It's just kind of like we said about Joe in the last round, or the last matchup. You can't use a veto against Tom Brady. Like I said, it was a toss-up for me. I might as well just flip a coin. Both teams are comparable offensive juggernauts, obviously damn near defensive juggernauts as well. So, either one of those teams could have moved on. So I have no issue with moving Bill and Tom on. So,
okay, well, that brings us to our finals. And this is, as always, pretty much every tournament podcast that we do, it's going to end with not arguably, it's a fact because we've picked it, the 2 best of whatever tournament we're doing. And right now we've come down to the 2 best NFL teams of all time. We have the 1989 San Francisco 49ers with Joe Montana against the 2007 New England Patriots with Tom Brady. This is a heck of a final. Tom, would you start this out for us?
Sure. And I do want to throw in this little caveat. I think maybe moving forward at some point, maybe the start of 2022, we want to discuss not allowing a veto in the championship round.
I
So if
agree.
you don't use it by the championship, you lose it.
I agree.
However, just staying with what we got going on here, I'm just going to continue on with what I've said. I think that '07 Patriots team is the greatest of all time. Bill Belichick, George Seifert. You're going to go with Bill Belichick. Montana and Brady is about as close as it gets. But I still think there's a slight edge to Brady. I mean, if he's the GOAT, he's the GOAT. In my opinion, that he is, or that he is. So, I mean, just a slight edge, the 21-20 win. I'm going to go with the '07 Patriots in this one.
Ooh, quick and concise
Yep.
by Tom. He went with his Patriots here. Let's see here. I will go next on this one. This, again, I just said it before. This is tough because it's the two best teams, because the tournament podcast said so, darn it.
And let me throw this in real quick if I can.
Go ahead.
I just saw a Guinness commercial with Joe Montana. And, let's be honest. I mean, Tom Brady is a nice looking guy and he is aging like a fine wine. Joe Montana is too. My God, he looks like he could still play. I mean, what are these guys doing? I mean, they're doing something. I mean, we know what Tom's doing. I've actually watched videos on the TB12 diet, but Joe Montana, man, if his diet is Guinness, I'm going to start drinking Guinness then. And I hate that stuff. Anyway, I'm sorry I cut you off, but
that's all right.
God bless those guys.
This is tough, and Tom just even added to the toughness. If that was going to be a deciding factor, which quarterback was more, was better looking, who was handsomer. Now I'm stuck on that too. But yeah, this is, I mean, in every way, these teams seem to kind of parallel themselves. Great quarterback play. These teams also had, great defenses as well. And one of my biggest things is when it's close, I personally say, look at the quarterback. Is one quarterback heads and above better? I don't think. I do believe Tom Brady is the GOAT, and I sincerely believe that. But I think Joe Montana is still in that discussion. So this one is darn tough. I guess. Oh boy. Yeah, this is a real tough one for me, guys. As I'm sitting here talking and stalling, I'm trying to process who I'm going to go with, to be honest with you. And it's tough, but man, I guess I'm going to have to, I'm going to go with the Patriots, and I'm not sure why. I guess, like Tom said, I was trying to think of any other tiebreakers, and I thought George Seifert versus Belichick. Belichick he has to be the greatest of all time. I mean, what a mastermind. So by the slightest of edges, I'm going to go with the Patriots. And it just came to me as I said it. Mike, it looks like it's already said and done, unless we're still allowing a veto. But who do you pick?
Now, this one's fairly easy. It's funny that both of these teams, I believe, I had losing in the semifinals. So, but yeah, this time around, this is fairly easy for me. No offense to the '89 Niners, and for years, I said Joe Montana was probably the GOAT. Because he had just, the stats, the championships, his resume was stacked. He had everything. So I said, Joe was probably the GOAT, but several years back, I think Tom Brady did pass him over. But yeah, it's those guys are, if Tom is the GOAT, like most of us think, like you said, Marty, Joe is still in that discussion. Joe is still one of the best of all time. So definitely no offense to him. But yeah, that Patriots team was, obviously came so close to being undefeated from start to finish. Bill Belichick over, who was it? Was it George Seifert or Seifert?
Yeah,
Seifert.
Seifert.
Yeah, I mean, just that alone, because the quarterback play so close. You got Rice against Moss, which is a toss up. But yeah, but both teams, again, offensively and defensively, top 5 on each side of the ball. But yeah, I'm just gonna, at this point, since everything else is so close, I'll do what Tom kind of does at times, and I'll look to the coaching. And Bill, arguably the greatest head coach of all time. So I'm going to go with the 2007 New England Patriots to not only move on, but as the greatest NFL team of all time.
And that is now a fact because it was unanimous as chosen by the Tournament Podcast. So there you have it.
Yeah.
The greatest team of all time, the 2007 New England Patriots. And just before we're done here, I just wanted to throw this out there. What was also almost a deciding factor for me, guys, was I was thinking, let's just say theoretically, Tom Brady got hurt in this greatest game. Who was his backup? It was Matt Castle. And then you look at the 49ers. It was their backup, Steve Young. It was that close for me that could have been the edge in giving it to the 49ers. But the Tournament Podcast has already spoken. So, as always, guys, if you enjoy this type of podcast or format or content, do us a favor, like the video. That really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Like, subscribe, share the video. We really appreciate it. And comment, let us know what you'd like. Did we miss someone? What do you want us to do next? We really appreciate it. So unless you guys have anything else, I think that is it for this week's episode. We appreciate you guys very much. Stay tuned next week for another episode of the Tournament Podcast. Thanks, guys.